Hey everyone, thanks so much for coming back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Sarah and I like to create beauty content, either project panning, eyeshadow tutorials, but today I am repressing and frankening this bronzer that I hit pan on and started to crumble. And I'm also going to be repressing this eyeshadow, but I'm going to be using that to franken my bronzer as well. So if you want to watch me franken and repress both of these products, then stick around. So I had my 8-year-old son help me with this part, which was crushing up the bronzer. He had a ton of fun with that. When I told him what we were going to do, he was like, "Really?" And so he was all into that. So he helped me crush up this bronzer into a fine powder, and then he got bored because he's an 8-year-old boy. And then I finished crushing it up into a fine powder, and I slipped a piece of paper underneath to try and catch some of the powder that was spilling out a little bit. So then I poured it out onto the paper, chop it up a little bit more, and then I'm going to pull out some of this eyeshadow and mix that in with the bronzer to help lighten it up a little bit and neutralize it a little bit because it's a little orange. So start chopping up that eyeshadow, mixing it in with the bronzer, and then add a little bit more because it doesn't look like it's getting light enough just yet. I'm trying to add just a little bit at a time to go slowly and carefully. So we'll add a little bit more, and then the whole eyeshadow drops out. Whoopsie. So pick up the big chunk, blow off the bronzer that got onto it, and then continue on chopping and mixing. I had hit pan on both of these products, and then they started to crumble up on me, which is what prompted this whole frankening and repressing session. So I figure I don't want these making a mess in my makeup bag, so I will go ahead and clean them up. Now time for a swatch. I'm happy with the tone of that bronzer now. It's less orange and a little lighter. So now it's time to add all of that powder back into the compact and add the rubbing alcohol to repress it. I'm using 91% isopropyl alcohol and trying to drip just a little bit in there. Here's where I should have stopped, and I kept going. So that's entirely too much rubbing alcohol. It's okay though, it just means it'll take a little bit longer to dry, but I mix it up into a really runny, like putty texture. Ideally, this would have been drier, but because it's so runny and liquidy, I need to let that sit for a minute before I try to repress it. Now we repeat the process for the eyeshadow. We crush up the powder into a nice, fine, loose powder and try to do it without making too much of a mess. I definitely lost some of the bronzer powder while I was frankening and repressing, but that's okay. I mean, I added some back in with the eyeshadow. But we do the alcohol again. I did a little bit better of a job on the eyeshadow and not adding too much alcohol at a time. So just a few drops here, and then we stir it up. Now we add a little bit more at a time, keep stirring and make it into a paste. And with the shade that I'm repressing, when you add the rubbing alcohol, it makes it darker. And so now to me, it looks like peanut butter. So now it's evenly spread throughout the pan and we are ready to press with the paper towel. So I've folded it up and I'm pressing it down with my fingers to absorb the alcohol. I press it down pretty firmly. The bronzer is still really wet, but I spread it out a little bit more and try to cover the surface of the pan, make sure all that bronzer stays in there, and then I will go ahead and press it down. This is definitely not the prettiest repress I've ever done, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to work. After all, it's a Franken. Here are the bronzer and eyeshadow right after pressing. They need to dry for a while. Here's what we started with, and here's what we ended with after a few hours of dry time. So this bronzer is much lighter, much more neutral, and I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. It's not the prettiest press ever, but that's okay. So here's another swatch of it after it's dried for a little bit. Much less orange than it started off with, and this is something I can use into the winter time. The eyeshadow pressed down really nicely. I kind of wish I would have kept it just in the middle of the pan because eventually I'm going to have it all up on the edges again, but that's okay. I mostly didn't want it to crack and crumble into my makeup bag anymore. That is it for today's video. This is all done and repressed and frankened to the way I like it. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!